guys. Welcome to episode 10 of Maniacs. And today we are speaking with Mallory. She was a World Harvest Bible College student, which is now Valor Christian College. She was there from 2002 to 2003. So her stint there was much shorter than some of the other guests that we've spoken to because she did realize rather quickly compared to the other guests that it was time for her to get out of there. But she does have several experiences that she wants to share with the viewers of Megamaniacs and talk about how her experience there shaped her and what she learned while she was at World Harvest Bible College, going to school to become a praise and worship leader. So please help me welcome Mallory to the show. Hi, Mallory. Welcome to Megamaniacs.
Hi.
How are
Hi.
you?
I'm doing great. Yourself?
Good, good. So I did, your intro, but as we do with most of the guests, why don't you start just telling us how you ended up at World Harvest Bible College back in 2002?
Sure. Okay, so it started in August 1999. I grew up in the church, but I didn't really take it seriously. It was just more of a thing, my dad brought me there. And but in August
You grew up at World
1999,
Harvest Church, you
oh
mean,
no, no,
or a different
sorry.
church? Okay,
I'll start from the very beginning, sorry.
okay.
I'm from Ohio originally.
Mhm.
I grew up in Northwest Ohio and like in the middle of cornfields. And I grew up going to church. And I didn't really take my faith seriously until about August 1999. I guess you could say I had like my come to Jesus moment. I think it was like August 27th, 1999. And that's when I decided to take it, seriously. And that's when I started going to youth group, volunteering at church and that sort of thing. And my whole life like turned around. It was like a big moment for me, and I still look back to that moment. And during that time, I sat next to, oh, so by the way, I was 15 years old at the time. And during
Okay.
that time, was in, I was in an American history class or it was social studies class. And I sat next to this kid and we were talking and we became friends. And he brought up World Harvest and he was like 15, 16 as well. And he really liked the church. I don't know why, but he just was like always talked about it and he loved it. And
Okay.
he invited me to go one Sunday. And I had no idea what World Harvest Church was. I had no idea who Rod Parsley was. I knew nothing. And I agreed to go. It was with him and two friends. And it was like a 2.5, 3 hour ride to Columbus from where I was at. And so one Sunday, we all get in the car, we drive to Columbus, and I went and I had no idea what to expect. I remember getting there really, really early. It was like 8:30 in the morning, and this is like during the heyday when you had to get there early or you didn't get a good seat. And so we ate outside the doors and we waited to get in, and I didn't know what it was. And then when I went inside, I was like, oh wow, this is fantastic. Like it was very well presented and everything. And we sit down, we wait another hour, and that's when I heard like, the praise and worship for the first time there. And to be honest, that's what kind of drew me into that church and that ministry was the worship music and their music ministry. At the time, I really, really loved gospel music. Um, Back when I was in seventh grade, I got the Preacher's Wife soundtrack, that Whitney Houston album, and I loved it. And it sucked me into like, that kind of gospel music. And when I went
Okay.
there, they had a very, gospel centric setup, and I found their music, I guess, anointed at the time and well presented. And I was just like in awe of the music. And I just found, the services that was really exciting. Ron Parsley, though, when he went up there, he was fine. He wasn't my style, but I was like, I didn't have anything against him. I didn't dislike him or like him. I was kind of like, okay, that's fine. But it was the music that really got me. And So at the end of the service, they had back then they had these two CDs. It was called Jubilee and Raise the Roof. And I'm sure anybody who went there years ago remember those albums, but I used to listen to them on repeat and I loved it. And so after that visit, you know, I I just loved the church and I wanted to keep coming back. So every so often, me and my friends would take a road trip down there. It was like 2.5, 3 hours. And we're all like 16-year-old kids, driving to this church in Columbus for the day and then, driving back for night service at our own church. And during that time, at some point, I found out there was a Bible college. I didn't really know for a while there was a Bible college. And I was like, oh, that's it. That's where I'm going. I didn't even think twice about it. So I went to the college days they threw in, I think I was 11th grade when I went to that. And once again, that really sucks you in because I really put on I guess, a show when you like go to class and things. And I was like, yep, this is it. And they had like a whole concert. I remember when I went, they threw like, it was like a concert. They had like Rebecca St. James there and LaRue, which at the time was like one of my favorite bands, and Tree 63. And they made like a whole production. They sucked me in. I was like, yep, that's where I'm going. And so um, I got really invested into music. I started participating in my own church music a lot. I took vocal lessons. I was did like choir and thing like that because singing was my thing as well. I forgot to mention that. So I was really into like singing at the time and I still enjoy it. So, and then I want to say it was like my senior year, I applied, had to get like my pastor recommendations and all of that. And I knew somebody from my youth group who went to that Bible college. I think he was like our assistant pastor or something at the time. And he even recommended the place. So I was like, sweet, I'll go. And then I applied, I got in, and that's basically it. It was, as I said, I mentioned, it wasn't like so much like, oh, Rod Parsley. Oh, it was just the music really enticed me. And I wanted to be
Okay.
under that and I wanted to learn under that. So, and and the other thing is too, like, I didn't plan on making like music like my career. Because I knew you don't make like a living usually being like a praise and worship leader type of thing. But I did want to like just throw myself out there and like, oh, I want to give 2 years to God and I'm gonna study the Bible and learn music theory and lead people into worship. And that was like my intentions when
Okay.
I decided to do it. So I did that and that's how I came about it. And I mean, basically just a friend introduced me and yeah, I got sucked in.
And then you were there. So
Yeah.
how long, I mean, and if you don't know exactly the time frame,
Yeah.
it's okay, but how long were you there before you started, raising some eyebrows at some of the things that you were seeing or hearing, or that you were being like the expectations
Oh,
and rules and
yeah.
that sort of thing?
Oh gosh, a week, 2 weeks, maybe. It was very quick. It was
Okay.
very quick. Yeah, yeah, yeah. At least like a week and a half, 2 weeks tops. Yeah.
And do you
Um,
remember what initiated, that first eyebrow raising?
it was the trying to think how to put this. The Rod Parsley centric stuff you'd see everywhere. I think, oh, the first thing I noticed that, was when I walked in the dorms and there was like pictures of Rod Parsley everywhere. There would be pictures of him like on the bulletin board. I lived upstairs in the walls. When you're upstairs, had pictures of Rod Parsley all over it and pictures of his family and Rod Parsley quotes. And at the time, you're just thinking, I guess they just really respect their pastor. You don't really think much of it. And then I noticed a lot of girls there, and I don't know why, had pictures of Rod Parsley in their dorm rooms hung up. And I thought that was a little bit strange because it's like
Oh,
it's your
that's weird.
pastor. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I remember just thinking, I was like, okay, because you're kind of not, you just don't question it. And I came from a smaller church. You're just like, all right, okay. That was probably my first thing is just seeing his face everywhere. And the other, there was this instance when I very first went there. he did this a few times, but I remember like the first, I think it was like the first week I was there, he pulled up in his SUV to like the front of the girls' dorm, and he would just sit there, Rod Parsley that is, and he just sat there, and all of a sudden all the girls would you'd go in the dorm and go like, Pastor's here, Rod Parsley's here, blah, blah, blah. And all the girls would like come out of the dorms and they'd all run outside into his car and like oh my gosh, like they treated like it was like a it was like a celebrity, not your pastor, you know? And they'd all
Yeah.
freak out and like and before this is before like your phones had cameras in them. And a lot of girls would run back in and get their cameras and then get a picture, a selfie with him or a picture with him. And I remember just sitting in the living room, like, okay, like this is whatever you want to do, I guess. And they'd like call like their mom on the phone and they'd hand him the phone, like, oh, talk to Rod Parsley. It's just like it was like this weird Rod Parsley, like it was like celebrity worship, it didn't feel
Yeah.
right, for a pastor to get that much attention just by pulling up. It was really uncomfortable. Um,
How many
and
times do you think that happened while you were there?
oh, good question. I'd say about four times, top of my head. I could think
Four
of four
times in a
times he did
year.
that. Yeah, yeah, at
Okay.
least. But I also worked, so it could have happened when I was at work and stuff. But
Hmm.
yeah, and I don't know if he did it at the boys' dorms or anything, but I know he definitely did it at the girls' dorms. And some
And
girls or
he seemed to
okay.
be enjoying the
Oh
all of
yeah.
the attention. Okay. Yeah.
Oh yeah. And then some girls or guys, like you would know this because you worked there, but like the little gate that he, has to drive into, there used to be
Hmm.
like that fountain area and there's like that bridge over there.
Sure.
And some
Yep.
people would kind of like strategically wait for him. Like they wouldn't stay in front of the gate, but some people would kind of wait outside for him to like drive by so they can say hi or try to talk to him. And I don't know. I just found that
Mm.
was really it's just really strange to me. Like, because it's just, as I mentioned, like, if you go to any other church, like, if you're just going to the Baptist church up your road or whatever, like, pastors don't do that. They don't treat themselves as, a celebrity. And it's just, yeah, and then bask in it. So I just found that was like within like literally like the first 2 weeks I saw that. And once again, I was like a 18-year-old kid. I didn't think much of it. You're just like, oh, I guess they just really like them. And then like,
Mm.
as you get older, you're like, yeah, that's not normal that's not pastoral behavior. That's not normal.
Right.
So yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So then you because you and I had a conversation, but I know there's some things that we didn't really discuss. But you had mentioned, several situations that you found to be very odd, and we'll kind of get into this, but then after seeing the podcast and thinking, how on earth were they, questioning certain things, and reprimanding for certain things when they were allowing all of these other things to go on? But you even mentioned something as trivial as wanting to watch a Disney movie. I think you said Beauty and the Beast, and they required it to be screened beforehand before you could watch
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, they had really strict rules. Like I understand, like maybe not watching like R-rated movies in like the downstairs, like we had one TV, so like they had to watch what you're saying. But I understand if like it's like an R-rated movie, but like any movie that you brought into there and wanted to watch, they had to watch it before you to make sure it's appropriate for you to watch. And I was like 18 or 19 years old, and I really wanted to watch Beauty and the Beast. Oh, and there was another time I wanted to watch. I think it was Oh, they did let me watch Prince of Egypt without looking. But like Beauty and the Beast, though, that had to be screened to make sure it was appropriate for me to watch. So it's just a little demoralizing. And it's just like, I'm an adult and it's a cartoon Disney movie. Yeah, I just found that really bizarre.
Hmm.
But once again, you go along with it because, like you're in the midst of it and they're the authority and you're told so often, like, just obey the authority. So that's why
Hmm.
I was one of the, yeah, that one I found that
Yeah.
quite
And
hilarious.
you even mentioned, and maybe you can go into a little bit more detail, but even they would reprimand you, or at least they were not you maybe specifically, but the
Yeah.
girls at the very least, about having visible panty lines through their clothes. So how were those conversations had?
Yeah. Sorry, once again, I'm sorry if I laugh or smile because I find this whole thing just ridiculous. Um, the I remember this. This is at the beginning of the year. We were all in our dorms, and it was like 8 o'clock at night, and we all got called downstairs to like the kitchen area. And I don't remember who it was, but also we had to have like this big talk, and they're like, "Oh, we have a new rule that no visible panty lines. You gotta, no VPL as they called it."
Yeah.
And if you chose to wear pants, like pants and a pantsuit, you couldn't have that because I guess it made the boys stumble for some reason. And I don't know, like I just find it incredibly creepy to sit
Yeah.
there and tell people what undergarments they can wear, that sort of thing. And so yeah, that was one. And then another time they brought it up again in the middle of chapel. One, I don't know when it was, but it was Rod Parsley's mom, Ellen Parsley, brought it up in chapel as well. She had like a whole rant about it. She just kept screaming, "No VPL, no VPL," and it's just it's very uncomfortable. And I don't think anybody really cared. Like, to be honest, like no one's gonna go out there and change their whole undergarments with that. But it's just a very strange rule to have to govern someone's body like that and what they're wearing. So yeah, I definitely remember that. And there was another rule with, I spoke with you earlier that men, if they came in with bald faces, they weren't allowed to grow new facial hair, which I don't understand what that was to do with anything, but
Yeah.
you couldn't grow new facial hair and you had to like keep it well trimmed if you did have it, which I understand to an extent. But yeah, there was like they controlled, how men grew their facial hair. You also had to dress a specific way. I think now they don't have any sort of dress code, but when I was there, it was extremely strict. Like if you wore suit pants, you had to have a matching jacket with it that went with the suit pants.
Right.
You had to wear a long skirt. You had to wear, dress up every single day. So there was a lot of rules with that. And, I was just like a poor Bible college student. So I was just getting stuff at Target. It was kind of hard to keep up with. So yeah, they definitely watched what you wore down to your underwear, I guess. And it was very uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and with those rules, is there one that stuck out to you specifically as being just super outlandish?
Oh, that's a good question. I think I think it's the VPL one that got me the most, and I think that's
Because
the
they
one
said
that
that was
always
like a
stuck out.
new rule, right? Like that's how
Yeah,
they
yeah, they brought
presented
it
it
up
to
on.
you.
Yeah, because it wasn't in like the actual handbook. They just
Okay.
decided one night, yeah, this is what we're gonna do. I don't know if there was an instance or anything, but I just remember being called down. They're like, "Well, this is it. This is the new rule." So we're just like, "Okay," like whatever. So
Because
we
your
just all went along with
VPL
it.
might cause a young boy to stumble. So,
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
so,
Somehow, I
so
don't know.
in that conversation, and I don't want to spend a ton of time on this, but in that conversation, were they preaching or teaching to dress more modestly, or were they saying just don't have don't have VPL, which
No, it was just VPL, all that whole thing. We didn't get like the,
okay,
dress, wear longer skirts or anything. I just remember being a whole thing on that. So yeah. So I
okay,
think we couldn't
okay.
dress any more modestly. For the way they made us dress, I don't think there was any more, we couldn't get any more modest than we were.
Gotcha. Okay.
Mhm.
Okay. Okay. So you started there in '02 to '03, and
Mhm.
in one of our conversations, I believe it was a correspondence, you were talking about the all of the weird obsessions with Rod Parsley and his family, and all of the Rod Parsley rules that surrounded him
Yeah.
that applied to you guys and probably other
Mhm.
people as well. Can you
Yeah.
talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. I call them the rules of Rod. I remember when I very, very first started, it was once again, probably in the first couple of weeks, we all got taken into think it was the basketball arena thing. And they went over the rules with him. Um, my favorite one is like you were not allowed to speak to him unless he spoke to you first. So if you were like walking down the hallway and you happened to see him, you weren't allowed to approach him. He was like he was like untouchable. You were just weren't allowed to talk to him, which
Hmm.
is a bit odd once again because that's your pastor. I do understand like it's a large church and they're not going to have time to sit down and counsel every single person, but I think you should be able to approach your pastor and maybe have a conversation or any kind of relationship with your pastor.
Or at least
Like
say
once
good
again,
morning,
exactly.
give some kind of greeting, right?
Exactly. Yeah, yep. Nope. You had to just basically like nod your head and go. It's I don't know. It's just like this self-importance with it. It's just like, who are you to have like rules like this, you know? And then the other bizarre one, which I remember even telling my friends about this rule, and they're like when I was like 18, 19 years old, and they're all kind of like, okay, was that you had to stand up if he entered a room and like
Which
acting
we've
like,
discussed. Yeah.
oh, you have? Okay. I just remember there were times where we'd be all talking and, like at a basketball, there was like a basketball, like a pep rally thing. I remember we were all this discussing. All of a sudden, everything got like hushed and quiet, and we had to stop our conversation because he entered a room, and then we all had to stand. And I don't know. I just find it very, once again, like it's just like, who are you that we have to stand up for you? Like, you're a pastor. Like it's not like the president showed up, and it just was once again like just this I don't want to say, well, maybe possibly like, worship of red parsley. It's just very uncomfortable.
Yeah, the
And we
same was
also had,
true when I was there. I mean, if
oh,
any
really?
parsley entered the room, we had to stand up. So,
Oh, wow. Okay.
it wasn't just Rod. It was Ashton or
It's like a,
Joni or,
oh,
I
wow.
never really
Okay.
was around Austin, but yeah, it was any parsley that walked into the room. Sorry,
Oh,
not to
goodness.
interrupt you.
Oh, no, no. I didn't know that. So that's quite interesting. Okay. Well, there you go. It's continued on that tradition. He also had this thing called, oh, sorry, this one rule that we had that we couldn't listen to certain pastors or preachers that I don't know if he's had a beef with them or what, but I remember this one instance where all of a sudden one day we got these notes like under our dorm room under the door. And all of a sudden, like, I don't listen to Paula White. I don't really care for her either. But we were just like saying, like, all of a sudden we were forbidden to listen to Paula White one day. They're just like, nope, can't talk. We can't listen to her anymore. You can't have her books in your dorm anymore. I don't know what happened. Somebody told me, I'm not sure how true this is, so just whatever. Was that she was also using like the resurrection seat as like a fundraiser, and I guess he got mad or something, but we just weren't
Well, she
allowed to
probably
talk about
didn't
him
give
on.
him his kickback.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we weren't allowed to have her anymore. I mean, as once again, I didn't follow her anyway. I just remember that being like strange. It's like, why do you care what I listen to on my free time or whatever?
Mhm.
So it's a bit, I think it's like really crossing boundaries, being told like, what you can wear, who you can listen to, and that sort of thing.
Yeah, like
And
controlling every aspect of your life. And then,
mhm,
you know, once and I might be jumping ahead a little bit here, but now that you've seen and some of the podcast episodes and listened to those, what did it make you feel like to find out that there was all of this other crazy behavior that was happening with students and elders and
yeah,
even Ashton herself, which at that point in
yeah,
time she would have still probably been in middle school or maybe
yeah, yeah,
but
yeah,
I mean how does that make you feel now to find out you had to have
oh,
a Disney movie screened and these people are out partying
yeah,
and gallivanting
yeah.
around.
Oh man, me and my friend talk about this all the time. Like it's just like this frustration and anger that you tried to do everything right, and like you were constantly scrutinized and you're constantly being watched. And then like seeing them just and hearing these stories now come out of like them just living life as they wish, as long as you were like in that, I guess I want to say elite group. If you were like, in it really involved with Rod and like that sort of thing, I just feel like those rules don't apply to you. I just felt like it was just they're just taking a bunch of naive 18, 19, 20-year olds and just telling them what to do. It just kind of, I don't, it's just like, it just makes me, the best way to put it, it just makes me angry and
Mhm.
frustrated. And I wish, I would have maybe picked another Bible college where they did roll every aspect of my life. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I don't know, you had also mentioned something about, and this maybe ties into what we just discussed, but about it being a personality cult. And
Hmm.
that's how you described it as far as they were trying to maybe indoctrinate and control as many areas of your life as possible,
Yeah.
to either impose their will or to create little Rod Parsleys everywhere.
Yeah. There was, I'm not sure if you talked about this before, I can't remember, but there was like an actual Bible college class called
No,
Current
we haven't
Prophetic
talked about
Reality.
that.
Oh, you haven't? Okay.
No.
I can't remember. There's one called, oh, so in Bible college, everyone is required to go to a class called Current Prophetic Realities. I'm not sure if they have it anymore, but they definitely had it back then. We
Okay.
called it CPR class. It was run by one of the main elders of the church. Anybody would know who this guy is. He did the class, and basically the entire
What was his
class, and this
name?
is
What was his name?
uh, Canfield, Elder Canfield
Oh,
ran
okay.
it.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So current prophetic realities or CPR was
Yep,
taught by Elder Canfield.
Canfield. Yep.
Okay.
And basically, what it was a class literally just about Rod Parsley books. It was like a college course on Rod Parsley's books. And I think it was like two per quarter, or sorry, two per semester. We had to go over his books. I remember we did Repairs of the Breach, and I can't remember the other books, but I remember definitely doing Repairs of the Breach first. So we did like four books overall. He would teach them, and then he would tell us like I just remember there was a lot of stories about Rod Parsley, and we had to do tests on these books, like literal like finals, tests just based on the books.
Mm-hmm.
And I just found that kind of strange that like why are we having a college class based on our pastor's books? And like so we were also required to buy the books, in order to do that. So it just I don't find that necessary. I'm just trying to learn about, Jesus and music theory. Like, I don't understand why I need to learn about Rod Parsley's, thoughts on the current culture. You know what I'm saying? It just doesn't,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't find it necessary in the slightest. And I feel like, I mean, and the thing is, that was a required class. Everybody had to take it. And we're also encouraged to buy his brand of Bible. Like you remember those? I'm not sure if you guys have them now, but we had like a thing called like a breakthrough Bible. And
Okay. I haven't heard it. I heard of the Jubilee Bible, but I hadn't heard of the
oh, this is
Breakthrough Bible.
this was before Jubilee Bible, I guess. Early 2000, they had the Breakthrough Covenant Partners Bible or something. And we're
Okay.
very much encouraged to purchase that specific Bible. Like, I don't know, like why do I need to buy that Bible? Like it's the Bible. So we're also
Did you buy
really
it?
encouraged to do that. Oh no, I didn't buy it
Okay.
because I already had a Bible, and it was also King James version, which I'm not a big fan of the King James. So yeah, so we're also encouraged to do that. But I found that class to be just just really out of pocket. Like it's just not normal for a Bible or any college to just have a class like based on their founders' ideas and thoughts on things. And then there was a class called Spiritual Authority that we had that it wasn't so focused about Rod Parsley, but I feel like it was a class that really, how do I put this? Drill it into your head to like not question these people and to just, go along with it because they're your authority. So we had like a whole semester on that with that. I think we had a book called, well, Spiritual Authority. I think it was by Watchman Nee, I think. but I remember having to do that as well. So I feel like they're just drilling this into you. And then I was in the music classes. So I didn't get a lot of this. My classes were pretty tame compared to a lot of people's. We just did like music theory, sight singing, and that sort of thing in choir class, which was fine. It wasn't anything too wacky, thankfully. But there was like preaching lab classes and that sort of thing. And I just remember like we were required to go to some of them as the musician section. And I just remember like every one of those people preaching up there just sounded like Rod Parsley clones. Like that's what kind of what they encouraged. You know,
Mm,
they would use like the same rhythm. You know how he talks? He has like a rhythm and stuff. That's how they would
mm-hmm.
all kind of talk. And I don't remember seeing like anybody just like, hey, I'm going to pull up my Bible and I'm going to we're going to go over, you know, John chapter 2 today and dissect it. It was just, I felt like everything was like a performance,
Yes.
trying to act like Rod Parsley. And I just felt like that's what they were trying to like get you because they put, Rod Parsley books in your head and then they, spiritual authority. And then all the preaching labs were just them mimicking him. It was just not normal. That's the best way to put it.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was just very Rod Parsley centric.
Yeah. And when you were there and you were kind of in the middle of all of this, were you questioning or kind of talking about this with anybody else that was there, or were you fearful to do that because it may get back to them?
Oh, I didn't talk to any like teachers or anything. It was more just me and my friend, like one of my best friends. I'm still friends with her to this day. We would talk a
Okay,
lot
the
about
one
stuff
that
like
you've
this is a bit.
mentioned several times.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because we would talk a lot about stuff. But I don't think I never. You're too intimidated to ever bring up stuff to like a RA or anything or like a teacher, because once again, it's kind of put in your head of like, don't question this. You're just you just I don't know how to explain it unless you like are actually there. You just don't think to question it. Like you're 18, 19 years old and like, this is where I'm supposed to be. They drill into you. This is where you're supposed to be. This is where God wants you to be. And so you just kind of go along with it. Like you think they know better than you. And,
Sure.
they have a successful ministry, who am I to say anything? And that whole, which you've touched on a million times was like, touch not thy anointed, whatever, you can't question those things because they'll use it against you somehow. So I never approached a teacher or anything. I kind of just laughed about it with my friend a little bit. I'm like, oh, this is kind of weird. Like we kind of whisper about things after chapel, like, like that was kind of odd. But that was about as far as it went.
Okay. Okay. So, other than the rules and the expectations that we kind of already touched on, were there any that stuck out also that we haven't mentioned that were kind of bizarre to you or overly controlling?
Oh, that's a good question. I think it's just, oh, I spoke of this earlier. It was at the dorms, have them having to know where you're at all the time. I think that I found that a bit weird because a lot of my friends like went to like Ohio State and like, big universities and like they actually had, freedom to go out and do things. They didn't have to like check in with an RA. We had to, for example, if you were out for a weekend, you had to get permission from the RA to go home, which I found weird because it's like, why do they have to know where I'm at? So we had to like actually fill out a form, get permission or to go home. So I feel like that was a bit controlling. They also had, I never experienced this, but it was a rule that you could have like a random room search. They could check your dormitory room if they wanted to.
Okay.
I found that a bit odd. And yeah, so I found that, but other than that, it was just every day of just you're just trying to do the right thing by wearing the right clothes all the time, having your hair right. And yeah, so I can't think of anything other than that. just
Well,
just having to ask
I
permission.
think that's enough. I mean, as far as going home to visit your family, did you ever know anyone that put a request in to do that and it got denied?
My friend did. I don't know the whole story, but I know her dad was doing some music thing. I can't remember the story because it's so long ago, but I know she didn't end up going because of that. And she wasn't even that far. She was in Cincinnati, and so she didn't get to go home and she missed it. So there was an instance
Mm.
of that, yes.
And
Um,
but you don't know why they declined. But that's the
no.
thing too, is that if you, because I believe that is still a thing, that if you want
Hmm.
to leave the campus on a weekend, regardless of where you're going, that you have to get permission to do so.
Hmm.
And that just seems so odd to me that we're dealing with adults. And
Yep.
but a lot of times, I know, at least during my time there, a lot of the Valor students, which was the Bible college when you were there, were work study. And so a lot of times they didn't even ask to go home, or they knew it was going to get denied because they were
Oh.
required to be working or volunteering or doing
Oh,
something there on those
yeah.
weekends. And I don't know, if that was sort of the same mentality when you were there, or if it was just a control to let you
Yeah.
know that they are calling the shots and kind of
Yep.
running the show.
Oh yeah, definitely. We didn't have like that work program. It wasn't so intense as when you were there. I mean, we were made to like do things, but it wasn't that intense. Like I remember we had to take a day off to like a school day off. We all had to like mow the grass and like weed the weeds. Sorry, weed the flower beds and stuff for like a
Okay.
conference. It was for the pastors conference. And I remember we all had to take a day off and do all that. And I found that was a bit weird. Like I want to be in class learning. I paid to learn, not do your lawn work.
Your
I just remembered.
landscaping. Yeah.
Yeah. We were all made to do the landscaping one week, and then another time I remember we all had to. I think Rod Parson was going on a tour or something. He was, I don't know, for his new book or something, and we all, not all of us, but it was a certain class or something, and they had to like bundle the books and like. They used us for labor with that, free labor. Anyway, that's besides the point. But they did use Bible college students for certain
So
things,
it was free
but not to
labor,
the
like
extent of
nobody got paid. Everybody
no.
just was forced to kind
Mhm.
of
Oh
do
yeah, it was a
whatever they
requirement.
needed you to do.
You had no choice. Absolutely no choices with that. So yeah, it was a requirement.
Mm. So, tell me about, and unless you have something else that you wanted to add to that, what you kind of talked about the lack of resources at World Harvest, and sort of
Yeah.
how it was presented initially,
Oh
but
yeah.
then once you got there, you found that it was nothing like it. It was almost like a bait and switch kind of
Oh,
situation. Can you talk about that?
sure. Definitely lack of facilities. We were told that there was a public transportation line, like a bus line by the
Oh, the
church.
bus. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a city bus. There wasn't, and it's really difficult because, as you know, the church is in the middle of like nowhere. It's like in the middle of cornfields, basically. And if you don't have a car, and like let's say, because a lot of the students from overseas as well, but if you don't have a car and you don't have a way to get to a job, there wasn't a lot of jobs at the churches at the time, so students didn't have a way to like go get a job. A lot of students didn't have a way to get groceries. You had to depend on everybody else in the dorm and able to get food. And, some couldn't work simply because they didn't have a car, but they were promised that there would be there's public transportation nearby. There absolutely was not any public transportation. There was nothing in that area. And this was before like, Uber and all of that. So you
Yeah.
didn't have a way to, do all this. We were also promised that there was a shuttle to and from the school because back then there was like the campus was up the road about 5 minutes. Now I think it's at the church. And we were told that there was going to be a shuttle to and from the school for us to get there every day. Luckily, I had a car, but I know a lot of people didn't. There was none. There was nothing there. Um, so you had to like just ask people and become friends very quickly in order just to get to school. There was we were told there was going to be a library, and yeah, there was a library, but it was like in the basement of, I think it was Dominion Hall, and it was literally like one computer that was, I mean, this is 2002. It was one computer with dial-up internet that was American Online, and it was so slow and you couldn't even use it. Um,
Hmm.
and it was just, there was like barely any books there. It was full of like charisma magazines. It was just like they didn't put any effort into it. You couldn't use it for anything. And like this, they required you to like write out, like reports and things. And like we didn't have any of that. Like you had to have a car in order to get to like the Columbus Library or something, because we weren't allowed to have computers, or not everybody had computers in their rooms, and nobody had access to the internet in their rooms. Like that was forbidden. So we didn't have any facilities just to do like our work. You couldn't type out a paper
Mm.
easily, and like
Hmm.
that should be like a very normal thing for any college to have like computers. They didn't have anything. And we were told there would be a library, so that didn't happen. And there's, once again, like there's like no, I guess you'd say, there tended to be help. There was no tutoring or anything. If you needed help, there's no counseling. It was just like everything like a normal Bible college, or just university, anything. Like it's just like you're kind of left out. We just went to class and that was it. And so yeah, it was very minimal on what it is. So
Very,
they didn't
very
really.
basic.
Oh yeah, yeah. They didn't invest back into the school. We'll put it that way. They felt like they
Okay.
invested more into the church, like build basketball stadiums and a cafe, but we couldn't get like a library, you know. Oh, like we get one computer. And so a lot of us just had to go to like the library multiple times, like up the road, like 10 minutes up the road. So anyway, so yeah, it was very basic. So I'm not sure if they've changed that since then, but who knows? But we were told differently, but whatever.
Yeah, the old bait and switch. And I wanted
Oh
to
yeah.
just touch back on because I saw in my notes here and you didn't mention it, but when just talking about needing the permission to leave the campus on the weekends, didn't you say that you had left for a weekend and didn't get back in time or something of that nature, and
Yeah.
because no one had key access? So can you
Yeah.
tell that experience?
Sure. So it was we went to a ministry event in Pittsburgh. So it was like 3, 4 hours away. And it was me, a friend, and I think there was a couple other people. I don't remember. We did ask permission, I'm 100% sure. And I said, "Oh, I'm gonna be home late that night." And they're like, "Okay, that's fine." Because I was gonna drive there in the morning, do the whole ministry thing, come back. It was a very long day. And I did it back and forth in one day. And we got home like at 3 or 4 in the morning. And we get there and we don't have access to a key, as you said. Like once the door is locked, you cannot get in. And a lot of us didn't have cell phones yet because they were just kind of becoming mainstream at that point.
Sure.
So we didn't have even a way to call them. So what happened is we like knocked on the RA's window and everything, and like they wouldn't, like I can't remember if they didn't let us in or they just didn't open the door, but we definitely made a whole thing. But basically, um, we just ended up having to sleep in our car, all of us. It was like 3 in the morning. And like we're a bunch of like 18, 19-year-old girls, and we're paying rent for this place.
Yeah.
It's not safe for us to be out there. Like, what if it was winter? I think it was like April. So luckily it was warm, but yeah, they wouldn't let us in. So we did all the right things. We filled out the right forms, and they just wouldn't let us in the door. And we never got an apology or anything for it either, which kind of makes me mad now as an adult. Like
Yeah.
nobody didn't said anything about it. It was just, and even at the time, that's something I really regret, is not making more of a deal about it. Because once again, you're just a young kid and you don't think much of it. But looking back now as like a mom, especially thinking about like my kid being out there like sleeping in a car,
Yeah.
um, it's just it, it, it it's ridiculous. Like so, yeah, I did everything right and it still didn't matter. So yeah,
And
so
did
yeah,
they
I slept
say,
in the
did they
car.
even address it? I mean, I know you said that nobody there was really no conversation, but did anybody try to address anything the next day?
No, like I just remember. I'm trying to remember what happened. I don't even think I said anything because once again, you're kind of thinking, well, they're the authority. They got the last word, sort of thing. So they didn't say anything to me. I didn't say anything to them, which really should have. And that is something I regret. But once again, I was young and naive. So you just went with it. You just thought,
Yeah.
then you kind of also think maybe it is my fault because I don't know, maybe I don't know, you just start
Well, yeah, you
questioning
try
yourself.
to justify it in your head, right?
Yep,
Yeah.
yep, 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 yep. So yeah, I said looking back, that is something I absolutely regret. I'm like, why didn't I say anything? Why didn't I do more? And so yeah, I slept in the car. So I'm really grateful though it wasn't winter. But that would have been then I probably would have
The
got more
bright
angry.
the bright side, right?
I
The
know.
bright
I'm
side of things.
trying to be positive here.
Right,
So yeah, that
right.
was yep, yep.
So you talked about, and again, hopefully I'm not jumping ahead here either, but
Hmm.
you talked about a year ago or so, you and your friend that you've mentioned here several times
Yeah,
decided that you were going to visit World Harvest again and kind of see if anything had changed or if
yeah,
everything was the same, and that the experience prompted you to even make a journal entry
yeah.
about it. And can you tell us about that?
Yeah. So me and my friend, I was visiting. And I was like, let's just see how it is. Like, I don't have like, I want to say trauma behind. It was enough where I was just like, I'm just more interested to see what's going on there. It's been a while. Walk down memory lane. We're like, okay. So we drove up from Cincinnati to Columbus and it was quite an experience. And all I will say is absolutely nothing changed in the last 20 years. So I'll just to make it easier, I'm just gonna read little inserts. I'm not gonna read the whole thing because a lot of it's just my thoughts and things.
Okay.
But it was a bit of an experience. So if that's okay,
Sure.
we arrived at the church about 10 minutes before it started. Oh, by the way, this was May last year. It was like May 8th, I think, or 7th last year,
Okay, of
2020.
2023.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Because we
Okay.
just wanted to
Okay.
retrace our steps. So we arrived at church about 10 minutes before it started. And the first observation is that probably it's less than half of the size that it was. When we were there, just to go in, you had to get
Sure.
there like at 9 a.m. to like, oh, I want to get a decent seat. This time we got there like literally like at 10 a.m. and like it was pretty empty. It was probably like 40% of what it used to be. A lot was blocked off, but it was the first thing I noticed. Like I could have just sat in third row like at 10 a.m. and nobody would have, said anything. So that was my first observation. It's probably around half the size. The back bleacher things were backed off and maybe half the bottom. So like even the bottom sections, like half the bottom section was empty. So there wasn't a lot of people there. The worship music began. They no longer have a choir that they once used to have. Let's see. They're during the worship sets, the words on the screen, so we're doing animations and crazy lights everywhere. It was overstimulating. Let's see, trying to get my opinion off of this. They said, okay, so the pastor gets up. I forgot how much this guy likes to talk about himself and Lester Summerall. That's the other thing. He really liked to talk about Lester Summerall. He brings up
Obsessed.
that guy.
Obsessed.
I think he brings up this guy 3 times a service. He always name dropped him, and I was always like, that's fine, I guess. But it was very strange.
It's strange. Yeah.
Just like the weird connection. Anyway, so before we even get to the sermon, we are reminded of the various things of the church and all the milestones that they had before honoring Elder Canfield. I guess he was in the church for 40 years or he was served for 40 years and they were having like a celebration of him. And before they even got to that, he went on and on about, all the church's milestones, like, oh, in 1980, 84, 85, it was Word of Life. And then we bought that, he kind of repeats the same script of like all the accomplishments. And so they did that. They honored Bill Canfield, which was fine. Um, and then they did the songs. Okay. Okay, this is something I observed, and this is something I noticed when I went to the church back then as well, was that you would see all the people on the stage. I said all of a sudden there's people on the stage screaming in the mic. They're always talking about like how close you are to getting, to your miracle, how close you are to breaking through, but you're never quite there yet. You're always this close, but if you give, X amount of dollars, that'll bring you, to your breakthrough. And they were still doing
Hmm.
that. So they're all on the stage going back and forth talking about that. And then Ashton gets up there, and then Joni gets up, and they're kind of, joining in on that. And they're this whole group of people, it was like the front line, Joni, Ashton, everybody. They're all just like speaking words over each other and prophesying over each other and knocking each other down. And Joni was telling somebody on stage about how she's promoting them in front of the congregation. And everybody's just shouting and dancing and speaking words of life over each other. And I just felt like this is something I felt back then too, is that the congregation's just kind of there to watch. I felt like you were like watching like you weren't involved. Like I felt like a spectator. And I realized during this trip that, oh my gosh, it's always felt this way. I always felt like I'm watching them all bless each other and give each other money and promote each other. And you're just there to watch. And they don't even know you exist really out there. Like, because once again, you can't talk to Rod Parsley. You can't talk to people on staff. Like, you're not really, it's like you're just spectators. And I remember that's
Hmm.
when it realized on this trip, I was just sitting there. I was like, oh my gosh, like we're not involved in this. I felt like I was watching theater. I just said it feels like you're just watching Rod Parsley and Friends. And then they had a whole section of the service dedicated to Ashton, and she was having a birthday. And so they went on about Ashton for about 10 minutes and just complimented her for 10 minutes. And and so then they start the sermon, and it's called Second Chances. And I was like, okay, that should be fine, whatever. And I really tried to just keep an open mind, and I was like, I'll sit through this. This is fine. But from the start of the sermon, he was already talking about himself. Um, Before he even got on stage, actually, the staff kind of gives him affirmations. And I remember one of them saying he was the best pastor in the world and all of this. And then he starts the sermon, and he just randomly brings up, and it's nothing to do with anything, how was in this high school hall of fame. And then he went about how, right after that, he talked about a story about Lester Summerall, once again, how he bought Ashton a pony and they shipped it from Iceland and went on about that. And like, it's just like, what has this to do with the Bible or anything?
I will still get you a pony, and I will still take you to Mickey Donald's and get you pancakes. That's what I used to tell her when she was in Miss Joni's womb. I talked to her every day, and I say, if you come out of there, I'll buy you a pony. But I didn't have to. Dr. Summerall bought her a pony, an Icelandic horse, and had it shipped from Iceland for her birthday. Yeah.
And I said it's like listening to like a multi-level marketing pitch. Like if you join us, you'll be blessed too. And that he kept using the kind of the same like phrasing. Like I could almost predict the kind of things he would say. And not once during this is the thing, not once during this whole sermon did he open his Bible. He did not quote a single scripture. Because I remember watching the whole time, seeing what he was going to say. Because I was going to look it
Hmm.
up later just to make sure it matched. Didn't open his Bible. Didn't quote a scripture. Not a single Bible verse on the screen. Like I'm like, aren't sermons supposed to be about that, dissecting the Bible? And he didn't say anything. I just felt like just kept going on these tangents about his accomplishments and like how he built the dorms in I think 3 weeks or something. And of course there's the offering
The
sermon at the
staff, the
end.
staff built those dorms in 3 weeks,
Oh,
by the way.
the staff. Okay.
The staff and
Oh,
volunteers built those
oh my God.
dorms in
They didn't.
in a very short period of time. Yeah.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, that explains some things. So we were So the offering came about. And I remember this kind of like thinking, I might have even said it to my friend that we're like, oh, I wonder what the magic number is this week. Because if you've mentioned before, like there's always like this magic number of like, oh God, it's the seventh week of the year and seven means perfection. And God's telling me that we need seven people to give 777. It's always stuff like that. But this
Sure.
week, the number was 58. So he wanted everybody to give $58 because it was something I didn't catch it all because I didn't understand what he was talking about. It was something about second Passover, which I didn't know was a thing. And I said it would have been interesting if he actually sat and explained what that meant, but he didn't. He's kind of casually mentioned it. And then he said it's your second chance to give after Easter. I don't know. Like it was just a very strange way to get people to give. So that went on
Hmm.
for 10 minutes. And then so that all happened. And then after the, church was over, we're like, okay, that's fine. And then we walked down the hallways because you had to like walk through like by the gym and stuff to get to the dorms. And we just wanted to like kind of retrace our steps just for fun. And we walked down the hallways, and there's an entire hallway filled with photos of them. It's called the Faith Hall of Fame.
Hmm.
And we talked about this earlier. And basically, it's just like a wall, like an exhibit, I guess it's almost like a museum exhibit of like Rod Parsley. Like, not like, oh, I don't know. It's just like him and his accomplishments. It's like, here's him as a child. Here's him at 8 years old. Here's him in high school. Here's the here's him getting his first jet, like these are the
Yeah,
accomplishments.
it's a
Here's
shrine. The
yeah.
entire place is a shrine
Mm-hmm.
to Rod Parsley and his family.
Yep. And then yeah, because Ashton was on there too. It's like, oh, here's Ashton's clothing line, and it was just like, okay. And then, even in the hallways of the church, there was still like Rod Parsley branding, like big pictures of him and um that sort of thing. So it was just as I mentioned before, you go to any other church, and if I walked in and just saw pictures of the pastor everywhere, that would kind of give me a few red flags of like, I didn't see what they're all about. So I just found that weird. I remember they were talking about the Hall of Fame when I was there, but they never built it yet. So it was interesting to see it in person.
Yes.
So yeah, and then the other thing was oh, that's just about the dorms. So that's fine. It's nothing to do with anything. So anyway, so
So
yeah,
essentially
so it's
nothing changed,
nothing
right?
changed. Absolutely. Oh man, I could predict the phrase. I can't remember I wish I wrote him down like what phrases he was using, but like I could predict his speech and what he was going to say because he kind of has like the same kind of script, and then his offering at the end. So nothing changed. In fact, I think he talked about himself a little bit more than he normally did. So yeah, it was a bit. It was
All
something.
about Rod, not nothing about God. You know,
No, the fact
seems
that
to
he didn't
be
open his
par for the
Bible.
course.
That's a time
Yeah.
like when he didn't open his Bible, that's when it got me. So yeah. And I was like, okay, I see where we're going here. And the fact that they had an altar call at the end too, and I don't even know what it was about, and he didn't open his Bible. Anyway. So yeah, it was like I got to listen to like his accomplishments for about an hour. So I was like,
Mm.
that's great. So yeah,
So
that was
really,
it.
really
So
felt spiritually fed after you left there, right?
oh no, it was yeah. I don't regret going because it was kind of like closing that chapter because we always just wanted to see what
Sure.
was going on. But it was an adventure. I'll just put it that way.
Hmm. Well, and I know when we talked, you said something to the effect of, I don't have like really any extreme bombshells and
Yeah,
tumultuous information and experiences
yeah,
like other people. But that you did have, these experiences there, and maybe not necessarily something that you had to go through a healing journey with and that sort of
yeah,
thing, but you did realize fairly quickly that this was not the place for you. You left there after a year. You didn't
yes,
pursue your praise and worship leader
no.
degree any longer after leaving there. So what would you say during that experience? What were your takeaways? What were the things that you learned?
That don't be naive. It's okay to question things if things don't seem right. Just because you're told over and over to obey your spiritual authority. I mean, you're allowed to speak up. and that also check your Bible in reference to what they're saying. Don't just take them by their word. And just because somebody's a great speaker and they're, charismatic and, oh, they're on TBN, it doesn't make them, infallible, if that's the right word. Like, it's okay to question things. It's okay. And that, and yeah, the biggest thing was to speak up. So, and when you see something that's wrong or weird, you don't have to sit through it, because um, one of the reasons I remember being a bit weird on leaving is because they put it in you from day one that, you're chosen to be here. If you leave, you're out of God's will. And um, that this is where God wants you to be at this point in time of your life. And so, they drill that in you, and like, not everybody's meant to be there the entire time. And if you leave, it's okay. And like, just because they tell you that, it doesn't mean it's, it isn't true. Like, I guess it gets down to that. Just don't let a church or a person or ministry, I guess, dictate what you do, and over your life. So it was a big, big, big lesson on just not being naive, I guess, and taking everything as I see it. Yeah. So yeah.
Okay. And I actually had another question that I didn't ask you before
Mhm.
asking you that one. Did you and if the answer is no, I'm grateful that the answer is no, but did you ever witness anyone being mistreated by leadership?
Oh, I gotta think for a second. I think probably not, because I wasn't really in like the elite group as much. I was just kind of like I don't want to say a spectator. I was kind of like an outsider. I wasn't like
Okay.
one of the cool kids in like the group. But I didn't see any from top of my head. I don't see anything firsthand. It was just
Okay.
more of being reprimanded by Rod Parsley about things at chapel and things, but not directly like with leaders. So yeah,
Okay. And
thankfully.
when Rod would reprimand in chapels or come in and yell or whatever, what was it about? Do you recall?
Oh, yeah, there was two times. The last one is what made me leave, actually. The
Oh,
first
okay.
time, okay. The first one was New Year's Eve. Okay. So everybody usually goes home for Christmas, like any college or university. So after New Year's Eve, right after we all came back, he brought us all to chapel to tell us that, yell at us for about an hour for not being at the New Year's Eve service. Um, because none of us were there. We were all home. Like, we're not going to come
Yeah.
back just for a New Year's Eve service. And he said he went on about how we weren't aligning with the vision of the church, and that we weren't on the same page as the ministry. And like, he went on about that. And it was just us being yelled at for like an hour. And I remember just thinking, it's like, we have lives outside of here. We want to go see our families. And I think I was away. Yeah, yeah, I was away. But so we had a whole thing on that. And so he yelled at us for not showing up for New Year's Eve. And then the second instance was around April. And this is when I was starting to really think about going. He came in to promote his book. I felt like it was just like a sales thing. He basically went up to the chapel to sell his book. It was called Ancient Wells, Living Water. And he went up there to talk about his book, promote it. And I remember like he was kind of like telling us, you have to buy this book, you have to be in the, share the vision that we have. And he like literally made us all buy it. Like, we were required to buy this. And like they passed around a thing, like an offering thing. They're like, oh, if you can't pay for it, give what you can. And I was like, I didn't want the book. I was like, I don't want to be told what to do. And so, like, I'm not even joking. When it went around, I gave like a nickel because I didn't want to do it anymore. And I was just like, I don't want this book. Like, why am I being made to do that? And so he went on about during the chapel, um, that, we all have to buy it. And at the end, we could meet him at the end of the chapel, and he was going to be signing the books at the end. So the whole thing just felt like a weird way to get sales. And I was just kind of like, why are we spending a chapel selling his book? And so
Right.
that was kind of like my thing of like, it just felt like an infomercial almost. And it was just weird. I just didn't like, I don't go to chapel. Once again, I go there to like, the praise and worship, to worship God and to learn things. And I'm not there to hear your book pitch, and being required to get that. So that was like the last straw moment of like, this is silly. Like, I'm not here to like, you know, up your book sales, I guess. So
Right.
yeah, that was it. And he just, yeah, I mean, I remember him yelling. I do remember this as a kind of a little quip of him. There's a guy out in the audience and he was like starting to fall asleep. And he like yelled at him during like the chapel, and he was all like, what are you doing falling asleep? And he's like, the guy just yelled back at him, like, I was at work last night. And like he like yelled back at him. Sorry, I know it's like nothing, but it just made me laugh that somebody actually spoke back to him. He just went on with it. But anyway, I just thought that was funny that people were
Yeah.
getting kind of angry too,
Mhm.
being reprimanded in front of everybody. But I, applaud to that guy for speaking up. So that was basically that why I left. And I had some, I didn't know if I should have left. You want me to touch on like when I left, or
Sure,
I can
sure,
tell you, it's
absolutely.
quick,
Yep.
it's quick, it's quick. So I felt really guilty for leaving because once again, you're told from day one that you're chosen to be there. And I just remember feeling like back and forth on this because I'm a kind of person when I start something, I don't like to stop. I like to finish what I'm doing. And
Mhm.
I talked to a teacher there. She was my Old Testament teacher. I really liked her. She seemed to have a good head on her shoulders and wise and all of that. And I actually did sit down with her. That's like the only time I ever did this because I was like, I don't know if, am I allowed to leave basically? Like I like almost feel like I asked permission to leave. Is it okay to leave? And she was just like, oh yeah, it's fine. She's just like, she made me feel so much better about it. She was just like, not everybody's meant to be here for, both the times. And if you feel led to leave, just leave. Like she's like, you don't really
Mhm.
owe anybody anything. And it just made me feel, I don't know, like you mentioned before when you left the building, it's like, like oh, you just felt good, like a weight was lifted off your
A
shoulders that,
relief, yeah.
yeah, yeah. And I was like, oh, I can leave. And it doesn't matter if, if I didn't finish it, that's okay. Like you could do something else, or finish it somewhere else. And so I just remember that happening. And I remember like, for example, when my friend left, this is what happens. Like we came back for like a chapel like a few months after we left just to say goodbye to everybody because we kind of abruptly left like at the end of the year and we didn't tell anybody we weren't coming back the next year. And like she told somebody that she's not coming back, and that the lady told her that she's like, oh, you just aborted what God was doing in your life. That's the kind of stuff you get, feedback you get, like if you leave here, you're like
Out of the will
you're
of
out of
God.
God's way. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's why you had to like talk through it. You're like, am I, out of the will of God? So, but when I left, I felt really good and I went out and did my thing. So it was just very freeing, and yeah, it was good. That's all I'll say. And
Mhm.
I just, I don't regret going. Because I said it really made you grow up real fast and kind of grow way less naive. But yeah, it was quite an adventure.
Yeah. Well, and I'm glad honestly to talk to somebody that saw the outlandishness of
Mhm.
how they control and how they behave and kind of run things there. But I was actually pleasantly surprised and glad that you didn't have you
Yeah.
were coming forward and didn't necessarily have such a negative experience that you had to go through this healing process,
Yeah.
but that it was bizarre enough and controlling enough that at some
Hmm.
point you said, you know what, this
Yep.
probably isn't for me and I need to kind of get out of Dodge here. and
Yep.
uh and that you did kind of leave and it was sort of uneventful.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I didn't
Yeah.
have like a huge climax. It was just this feeling of like, this isn't right. And,
But it was
I'm
guilt.
just,
I mean, you had a lot of
oh,
guilt,
yeah.
but
Oh, yeah.
that's the brainwashing, right? I
Hmm.
mean,
Yep.
that's
Yep.
the constant putting in your head that God has you there and you are out of the will of God if you decide to
Hmm.
leave this place.
Yep. And
Yeah.
so I'm glad I didn't listen to that and just used my, you know, just felt led to, went with what I felt led to do. And so I didn't let them dictate that. That's when I had enough. So yeah, I feel good about it too. I'm glad, like I'm very thankful I didn't have like some of the stories I've heard before. that, I was more of an outsider. I'm so glad for that because part of you kind of wanted to be kind of like in the inside because that like you were like part of the
Yeah.
cool group. You know what I'm saying? And I
Yeah.
was not cool back then. Um, so 'cause that's where you felt you got, like special attention and, oh, I got to go travel around with, Rod Parsley and sing. I was never part of that kind of group or anything. So I'm glad I wasn't, and I'm glad I didn't get sucked into it because I know a lot of people really tried and like I just felt like there was this atmosphere of you're trying to like make your way into like the inside, like their little group.
Their
Because then
inner
like they'll actually, I
circle.
guess, yeah, yeah, yeah. 'Cause I feel like then they'll actually like you'll get paid attention to. I don't know, be appreciated. So yeah, yeah. So I'm very, very thankful that, I didn't get into that. So I'm glad I left. And I have like, I had no bias. I had nothing coming in. I didn't know what to expect coming in. And so I'm glad I used my head on that and like was led
Yeah.
to just get out of there.
Yeah. And what would
Mhm.
you, I mean, if you have anything else to share before we get to the next question, you're more than welcome to. But I mean, what I would ask you is what would you share with any, with a young person that said, "Hey, I'm thinking about going to Valor Christian College, which was World Harvest Bible College when
Yeah.
you went there."
There's lots of other great colleges and seminaries out there. Go investigate, go look at the classes at World Harvest, and see if, there's things, as I mentioned, like the CPR class and things like that. Have a look, investigate it. But I mean, I would say absolutely no. There's way better universities out there that have more resources, that don't have such strict rules. Just look into it more because I think that was my thing too. I didn't really investigate as much as I probably should have too. That's a little bit of my fault. But
You
I
were
just,
young.
oh
You
yeah,
were
I was
young
like, am I
and
get?
you get
Yeah.
sucked into the
Hmm.
emotion
Yep.
that is going on because it is, I think that especially when you're young and sort of naive,
Hmm.
you and especially when you went there in the late 90s, I mean it was very almost hypnotic,
Oh
when
yeah,
you go
addicting.
into these worship services and there's this excellent music and it's invoking
Hmm.
all of these emotions in
Oh
you,
yeah,
and then you
exactly.
see all of these other people that you believe to be more spiritually mature than you that are
Yep.
worshiping this guy, and you just
Hmm.
think, well, this is what I'm supposed to be doing too.
Yep, yep. See, you said it much more elegantly than me. That's exactly what I thought back then. As
Yeah,
like a 15 to 18-year-old, whatever. Because I just am like, I just want to be in this atmosphere all the time. And and you
right.
thought that was gonna do it. And then it was just like, oh, okay, this isn't what I thought it was gonna be. So yeah, exactly. You nailed it.
Yeah. Well, is Mallory, is there anything else that you wanted to share that we didn't discuss?
Ooh, let me have a quick look. 'Cause I have a few little notes. I think most of them were just, yeah, that's pretty much it. That's like the idea of it. So yeah, that was my experience in a very small nutshell.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I certainly I appreciate you coming on and sharing your story. And
Yeah.
again, I knew or I was hopeful that all of the people that I was talking to that are reaching out, that they had experiences there, but not necessarily ones that were so abusive and so toxic that
Yeah.
many people leave there questioning their relationship with God,
Yeah.
questioning if they want to be
Yeah.
Christians anymore,
Yeah.
and really suffering a lot of mental health, and
Yeah.
psychological and spiritual and mental and emotional and sometimes even physical effects from everything that they went through while they were there. So it's a blessing that,
Mhm.
you haven't, you didn't have to necessarily experience those things. But,
Yeah.
and I'm also glad that, you were kind of, the Lord was protecting you by,
Yeah.
because I've also talked to people like that thought that, God was mad at them, or kind of cursing them because they wanted so much to be accepted and be on that inner
Mhm.
circle. And then now that they're hearing all of this, they're, sort of their, I don't want to say disdain, but they were holding a grudge a little bit, but with God, like, why didn't you let me, carry out what I thought
Mhm.
my calling was? And
Yep.
now they've realized that it wasn't necessarily God not allowing them to live out their calling, but it was actually God's protection on their life.
Mhm.
And so their
Yep.
perspective of things has definitely changed.
Yep. That's some good points. I felt like this whole podcast, as I mentioned before, is like therapy, just hearing other people's stories and not thinking like, oh, maybe I blew out of proportion and that sort of thing. It's like, no, this is just how it was. But
No,
yeah, that's
it's
very
really
good.
how it is. It's really how it
Yeah.
is.
Yeah. But you just
Well,
think,
anything else that you'd like to share?
no, I think that's basically
I
the
think that's
most
it.
of it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I thank you for being on. I thank all of you for watching the podcast, subscribing, liking, sharing, and please continue to do so. And join us next week for episode 11 and a new guest. Thank you. Have a good evening.